All right, so we got the next edition, and we got two Schuco powerhouse team members on the podcast. And what I love about this podcast and just the industry in general is that you're able to connect with and bring out some of the brightest minds through the Ethernet. So it's I'm glad we're here, and it's funny because Daniel, you and I started interacting, and then I asked Spencer about you, and I didn't realize the two of you know each other. So maybe Spencer, you can go a little bit into your time in Germany in the facade education world and how you came about Daniel.
Well, I think I actually met Daniel first just through my work at Schuco. I think we were collaborating somewhat because at that point, I think you were working in building science division, specifically doing like
Mhm,
thermal studies and
mhm.
like Flixo modeling of like spandrel assemblies and things like this.
Yeah.
And so there was some collaboration there. And I can't quite recall when we exactly first met, but we used to do a lot of custom unitized curtain wall projects in the US. So we were always relying on our engineering support in Germany,
Mhm.
to answer kind of difficult technical questions and help us work through like challenging, engineering problems. And I think that's when I first met you, Daniel, was in some of those conversations initially when I was in New York.
Yeah,
And
this
then,
this this can be, this can be. But I
yeah,
I can remember better when we met in Detmold,
yeah,
at
yeah.
university, right?
Right, right. Well, then I became your student, right?
Yeah,
So, and
that's
then you were
that's
my
funny
professor.
story.
So,
Something I actually just brought up with Matt on the last podcast is about attracting young talent into this industry and how much emphasis on education and apprenticeship is placed around facades in Germany versus the US, and maybe the
Mhm,
lack thereof here in our market. So Daniel, as I ask a lot of people here domestically
mhm.
what they think of the European market in facade systems, but what do you think of us over here stateside? What is sort of the perception? Is our assumptions correct that we're somewhat archaic and slow to adopt a change?
No, I would not say it like that. Let me tell you a story. When I was first in the US, this was 2015, and there was this Facade Tectonics World Congress. And this was also a conference where I had a talk about shadow boxes. And I was working in this building physics department and worked on projects here in Germany and also other European countries. And then I saw in the US some presentations, and I thought, whoa, they are way back behind. When I see the US market now, I see that you adapted very fast from 2015. And there I think you are much faster with sometimes with adaptation than we in Germany.
Hmm.
That's my feeling.
In what aspects, what major changes have you seen since 2015?
Yeah, I think it's really about this whole thing of saving carbon and reducing CO2 emissions. There, I think you really speeded up from 2015. Also building regulations with regards to energy savings and so on and so on. So that's my feeling. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get your take on this, Spencer. Now, I had a discussion yesterday with a Vancouver developer who is a former architect and focuses a lot on sustainability and bringing up the question around what design decisions and especially from a developer standpoint, cost decisions make the greatest impact. If you're spending money in the wrong buckets versus the right buckets, and what's really going to move the needle. And we talk about some standards that are normal in the Schuko world overseas, like cradle to cradle aluminium, but here using necessarily materials with a certain recycled carbon content is not necessarily the norm yet. And so, when we're trying to trend in the direction of being more sustainable, what are some guidelines or roadblocks or sort of principles that people can abide by? I mean, I know you're a very strong advocate of the sort of the passive house principles as a guiding starting point. Do you think that's sort of the first step that we need to go towards?
I think so. And the reason I think that is, it's achievable. It's something that we have a very clear roadmap. There's precedent for it. It's really assuming your site conditions and your exposure and building use allow for that set of guidelines to be implemented, or those principles to be implemented, there's a very like clear cut procedure towards like engineering a solution to improve the energy efficiency of the building and reduce its consumption for heating and cooling, right? That's something that we've proven at scale. And I think it's sort of low hanging fruit. It changes the typology of the building a little bit, depending on what climate zone you're in, and the exposure, like I was saying, it can change the look of the facade, right? Maybe reduce the amount of glass. But it's definitely something that we have like the technology to achieve in terms of systems, material, and the engineering solutions, and the roadmap is there. I think what's kind of the next step is to look at the material itself, right? And the embodied carbon. And that's kind of the next step of this, I would say. I mean, I think the first step is always to look at making the function of the building more energy efficient and defining sustainability that way.
Yeah, it's sometimes I talk about like going to extremes, triple glazing with multiple coatings, or even vacuum glazing, or hyper insulated passive house type framing, but more so if you just kind of, as Helen always says, started with an envelope first approach, and
Yeah.
started with your envelope and then focused on downsizing um, your mechanical systems, and in turn maybe being able to utilize building automation to really make the building hyper efficient, to maximize daylighting or eliminate some of that solar gain.
Hmm.
And Daniel, what role, I guess, from what you see in the commercial construction market, when projects are being sort of developed very early on, even in concept, do facade consultants play a major role in this? Are a lot of these decisions heavily enforced by the architects? Because I would imagine the developers and the general contractors aren't coming in, forcing or demanding these sort of design or sustainability conscious decisions. Is it really just bred within the design community?
Um, let's say it like that. What I see here in Europe, um, in the last 5 years. Yeah, let's talk about the last 5 years. It was very often like that. We have these regulations on saving carbon. And then we have these typical example buildings that you should meet with, and but finally, the whole design was not really holistic, and then the facade consultant comes in very late, and finally, with the facade, you have to come up with very good U values that are nearly very heavy to reach, because it's the last chance to really meet the requirements of the building. And this must change, because what I think is this whole planning must be very holistic from the starting point on, and their digitalization and BIM will also help us very much. It changes now. The UK is, for example, doing there a very good job, where really carbon control consultants or something like that come in a very early stage, and look onto all products in the building from a very holistic perspective. Let's say it like that. And I think that's the right way.
So what you just said about utilizing BIM, which I think can help, what other tools is it very common to do whole building energy modeling, which might be a form of that, and then like kind of iterative approaches as you're making slight changes within either the structure or the system typology?
Yeah, I would say it like that. That's yeah, I would say this is really this can be key. Um,
And what would you say the other factor that I want to bring up is, like, it sounds like a lot of this is really ingrained in the culture, really, and kind of has become business as usual. But I think where we're stuck here stateside is that we don't really know what's going to move the needle in terms of how to incentivize owners, how to write the codes to be
mm,
very hyper effective. It sounds like we have these very stringent progressive energy codes in certain jurisdictions, and it's, trending us in the right direction. But when you talk to the people in Seattle and in Boston that are abiding by these new aggressive stretch energy codes with envelope backstops, everybody's confused and lost and just trying to interpret the code properly and not get themselves into trouble.
mm,
And so I guess overseas, have you found it's a healthy balance of, adequate or good enough code, but also incentivization to, spend more money in terms of maybe like, carbon loans or energy reduction
mm.
loans to incentivize building owners to spend more money in the right areas?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is also a very important point, and you need both. I think you need regulations and you need the incentives because, of course, when you want to save carbon emissions, your building will get more expensive, And so these are two things, but on the other hand, we also have to make the people aware of that this is a necessity to save our world finally, And this is, from my point of view, what happens more and more because one point is that the people feel it in their own pocket, because we have here in the last 2 years we had here some floods, we had very hot weather and so on, and these are things that also cost people money, and that's how people really feel that, And on the other hand, we are also changing. We are also facing the weather change or the climate change. Really, we have this kind of harsh weather events, and that's also where people get aware of that. So I think, and this is an important point. This switch in the head, and finally, this you don't manage with neither with regulations nor with incentives. That's really people. Yeah, unfortunately, they have to feel that.
So are you noticing, this is a very going to sound very uneducated, but are you noticing major climate change in Germany as well? I mean, I know it's a
Yeah.
rather temperate climate, but in the States we have such extreme,
Yeah.
climate variances. But in Germany, are you seeing that same impact?
Yeah, we see that. So that's, as I said, so we had some floods here in Germany during the last 1 or 2 years, and what we see is, I can tell here from Bielefeld where I'm located, when people came to Bielefeld in the past, they always said, "Oh, in Bielefeld it's always raining," But the last 2, 3 years we had here sometimes very hot weather, in a mix with very drastic rainfalls, So we had hot periods and then we had very drastic rainfalls, just like the last 2 days, what was very heavily raining. And this is something different. In the past, it was always quite moderate. You could say the winter is cold, the summer is warmer, but also sometimes rainy periods. But meanwhile, we have summer, sometimes very hot temperatures, then followed by very heavy rainfalls, and this is different.
So with that change, are you noticing a shift or evolution in facade performance criteria and expectations, or it has a system performance baseline rather stayed stagnant?
No, it changes where I really have to say, because this is what, let's say in the last 15, 20 years, innovation in facade and or window construction was mainly in improving the U value, the winter energy performance of facades. And meanwhile, it really changes, because here also now summer heat protection gets much more important. And also we see that with improvements of U values, we are on our limit. And also this improvement also had to do with a lot of additional embodied energy that you needed in your facade systems, And then now it gets a bit better into balance. But I also have to say, we have here very hard regulations, a lot of regulations. And this also is a kind of blocker for innovations, because the regulations were further developed with the innovations in energy performance, but this blocks now innovations in another perspective. We don't come out of our regulations. You get the
And
point,
so
or?
in your most extreme winter months, what is sort of call it the equivalent of December, January, February? What's the average temperature that you're dealing with?
Average temperature, I also always find a bit difficult to say, but what I can tell you is when we talk about 10 years ago, we had sometimes winter temperatures with minus 15 degrees, minus 20 degrees, but this was the maximum minus, Today, for example, I would say it's very seldom that it goes below minus 5 degrees or something like that.
So if I guess what I'm trying to get to is, why is so much emphasis placed on U value, and is triple glazing, a glass assembly with a 0.12, Spencer, you can translate the equivalent, 0.1
Oh yeah, now it gets
center of
difficult for me.
glass, like the baseline, and then now we just keep trying to improve the frame performance.
Mhm.
Well,
That was a question, Spencer. I guess like is baseline triple glazing, multiple coatings, and now the limiting factor is frames, so we just keep, extending that baseline.
well, it's both, right? So there's kind of there's a limit to what you can achieve with your glazing, conventional glazing technology and insulated frames, where beyond that, there's a huge cost premium, right? So as soon as you go outside of the IGU assembly, right? Because you can improve the U value of a window if you just add additional components. I mean, and there have been systems that even Schuco's tried to bring to market in the past where there's like an IGU and then there's a shading element, then there's an inner light, what we would refer to in the States as like a storm light. And you have this huge monolithic window assembly with all these different cavities in it. The U value is incredible, right? But the cost is also incredible. So, there's kind of this point where we're in my opinion, and maybe Daniel, you can, chime in here. I think we're kind of at the upper limit of what we can achieve with conventional like insulated glazing assemblies, because now it's about the coatings. It's like innovation in coatings is what's kind of moving the performance threshold a bit. But you can't really, even within the European norms and the calculation standards, in Europe, which give you a benefit to increasing the cavity depth, right, from 12 millimeters and up, you still reach an upper limit. Once you get to about 20 millimeters, beyond that, you're not really getting a whole lot. So, I think it's kind of a limitation of that platform, that technology platform, is what you see. But what's interesting is like if you look at the passive house criteria, right, is kind of, let's call it some sort of benchmark that can be used to assess the relative, success of the energy performance, or conservation of a building. You can achieve that within the climate zones within Germany with that platform. So, it's like, well, how much less heat do you want to have flowing through the assembly? You already have so little, with that criteria. Then the conversation really becomes about other aspects of the building, the opaque insulation, for example, or the exposure, or the mechanical system, or what are the internal loads, that you're working with. But
Well,
that's my opinion. I don't know.
Your comment on the podcast with Helen about how, the standard 1-inch IGU with a low on number 2 here. What is the standard there? Is it triple glazed in somewhat what thickness with how many coatings?
Let me think about. So I would say, you have triple glazing. We have here a wide range. It totally depends what you want to build. But when I look into our catalogs, we have the systems where you can put in glasses with 60 mm or something like that. With a thickness of 60 mm. And then, of course, you can use every coating that you want. You can use a low E coating there. You can also use then sun protective coating. And finally, it's a combination. And from my point of view, you never have, or you always have to see project specifically. That's why it's hard to tell what is generally used here in terms of glass. It's always, depends on the project and the location.
But I guess what I'm trying to really get down to the core root of it is, I'm wondering if a lot of your assumptions over there are the same as ours over here in terms of, there's this weird misperception that, all glass buildings are expensive, or there's this drive to lower window to wall ratio for better thermal performance. And maybe these are like, someone might call it low hanging fruit, but maybe like the easy button. And it's not necessarily the right answer because, as we talk about sustainability, maybe there's more embodied carbon in one approach by incorporating more different materiality, or maybe spending more time on site is imposing more risk, or more overall embodied energy just running the construction site. So it sounds like what you're saying is, yes, you can get crazy with the U values and get hyper insulated, and it's just very expensive, but obviously cost is a driver. But are you seeing a push away from highly glazed facades as the industry tries to drive down the overall thermal performance of the envelope, or not necessarily?
No, I see that. Here in Europe, we have that already. That you that especially in Scandinavia or also in the UK, the requirements on the overall building performance is so high that you can't manage that with fully glazed buildings anymore. So most of the time, you have opaque wall construction, then with windows installed in between, and then of course, an opaque wall, the energy performance of that is so much better than a very good performing window, and you will never get there with a window or with a glazed area.
So are you implying you're seeing more punched windows with like stick built construction surround, or like precast facades, or light gauge stud walls? Or are you saying you're still seeing a lot of unitized curtain wall, but there's just much more opaque area instead of vision area?
Personally, I would say it goes more in the direction of modular construction, where you have really these huge modules with punched windows in between, because it's like that. The better the fillings of a unitized facade get, so the opaque area and also the glazed area, the more important are getting the profile sections, let's call that joints between the units, and this limits then the performance, and there you are somewhere really, you are really at the limit with a U value, so at one point you can't get it better, and this you can then make much better when you work with modular construction.
So I guess we call it like a mega panel facade here, but
Yes.
large scale, column to column, either vertically or horizontally oriented panels. Do you notice you have a very wide range of system availability or options or various contractors to choose from, or is the market sort of dominated by, a select few players?
No, I would say we have a wide range, Of course, we have a few players, also competitors from Schuco, of course, but there are then also these big metal companies that have their own systems. We in Europe we also meanwhile have competitors from China that are coming in, and this is easy with unitized facades, of course, or also these mega panels, because you can build it in your country, in your own workshop, and then deliver it to the country where you want to build it up.
Do you see any, what I'd say, domestic North American suppliers coming into the European market?
No, I don't know anyone. No.
And is that strange to you?
Do you know one?
I mean, I don't know of anybody who's building facade material in North America and then shipping it. Well, in the United States, let me correct myself.
And why is that? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Europe.
What would that reason be?
Well, I mean, I have opinions on this. I think fundamentally there's two big reasons. One is the standards are totally different, in terms of engineering qualifications, thermal, structural, air and water infiltration performance. Like all of those standards, test methods, and qualifications are different. I mean, the physics is the same fundamentally, but the methodology you use and have to document is vastly different. And then, there's a cost difference too, right? So, I think if you're going to be importing into Europe, you're generally looking to save money on the material, right? Not add cost, right? And there's so many, qualified facade fabricators in Europe that, the counter argument might be, oh, you're looking for a higher quality system, but the reality is, some of the best facade, fabricators and contractors are based in Europe. So
I guess what we're getting down to is there's no real capability, unique fabricator, something that a North American or United States supplier is capable of doing that cannot be found in Europe.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah.
I also think
let's just say it like it is. I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't. Nothing comes to mind. Let me just put it that
way. And I think it's also maybe the business model of your US suppliers is different than the business model of our European suppliers. So when you buy a facade here from a supplier, the manufacturer is also the installer that installs the facade on the building. And I think in the US the business is different. Or you have these installers that are different, that differ from the manufacturers, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And this might also be a case,
I just say that because we have this discussion all the time. Just the incredible amount of unitized systems that are being imported here from all over the world. And to some extent, I think some are, from a design and capability standpoint, it is significantly cost driven. Sometimes you're importing a material or materials that can't be sourced here domestically if you're achieving a certain U value or whatever the case might be. But the one topic I want to touch on is, do people talk about or seen any implementation of vacuum glazing, Daniel?
Yeah, I've seen that people are talking about that, it's also, but I also know some people that have it really installed here in Germany, but always as a kind of hybrid glazing, when you have a IGU where one glass pane is then vacuum glazing,
Yeah, it's a hybrid. It's still an insulated unit, but one of the lights is vacuum. But
yes,
I mean, let's just get right down to it. Why has it not taken off? It seems to be this great solution. I hear it's widespread in Japan. There are I have a number of suppliers now from overseas, reputable suppliers that are capable of producing at scale. And if it's this solution to drastically reducing the center of glass U value, what is the limiting factor? Why are people so afraid to bite?
It's so you mean not as a hybrid glass, you mean just as a standard, as a single glass pane, or?
Either or.
I think for hybrid it's a price. That's my feeling, and it's something new. In the past we always thought, okay, it's the spacers in between, that you would see from an architectural point of view. But meanwhile, we know that you can also get it transparent, and then when you are 1 meter away from the glass pane, you don't see it anymore. So this is not really a reason. But using vacuum insulation glass as a single glass pane, not as a hybrid, then of course it comes to the problem with the frame. Because the U value of the frame is good because of that of the thermal break. And this thermal break needs space. When you have a very thin glass, you don't have the space anymore for the thermal break. That's a big issue.
What do you think, Spencer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to make the assessment of what is the real performance increase relative to a triple pane IGU, and what's the cost difference. And that's what it comes down to. It's can you get equivalent performance from what's currently in the market, saturating the market? And if there's a massive, increase in performance with a minimal cost difference, then okay, that's something. But I'm still seeing it currently fitting more of a niche application for retrofits, or where you have limited space. And you need to have performance increases that are unachievable with kind of conventional IGU methods. Then there's a huge, opportunity for it to be used. But I think until the cost comes down to either being, comparable, like at the same level as a triple pane IGU, or even lower, it's not going to get the kind of market penetration that, you would hope to see. And remember also, it's a little different aesthetically, right? It's doesn't have the same level of transparency that conventional glazing does, just
So
due
I
to
will
the
admit,
nature of its
it is
fabrication. Yeah,
very difficult, if fabricated properly, to see the pillars. It's really,
it
call it
is.
negligible.
Yeah,
But my concern more so, that I think is not talked about enough, is the durability of the edge seal,
Yeah.
and
yeah,
how perfectly that has to be fabricated, and how if something goes wrong, you basically lose that vacuum.
yeah.
People talk about the lifespan of a typical IGU, and can you get a 10-year warranty, a 20-year warranty? But I'm in a unit right now with an insulated glass unit, probably from, I don't know, early 2000s, still working just fine. You might get a little argon seepage out, but these units should be lasting you 30 plus years. And with vacuum, unfortunately, we don't have sort of the case studies to go back and assess and review, and enough out there to monitor, which is challenging, to say the least. I agree, in replacement, I think it makes a lot of sense, but in new construction, especially when weight isn't an issue, in a lightweight unitized facade, coupled with the fact that triple glazing, the price is probably going to start either tapering off or trending downwards as it becomes more commonplace here.
Mhm.
So that's going to be a challenge. Daniel, what about dynamic glass? Kind of like is Sage popular over there, or
Okay.
View, kind of like that tintable glass? Have you seen any traction with it?
Yeah, in some projects I've seen that, but it's also, from my point of view, not so popular as it could be. I also see, I think it also has to do with the costs finally for that. No one wants to pay these additional costs there, and the performance is of course also not as good as when you would have outer sun protection devices. I find, from an aesthetical point of view, it's a nice product. But I also have the feeling that people have really problems with buying very innovative materials. I think there is a kind of block that keeps them away from that. That's my feeling. It's
I think it's, look, if
unfortunately,
executed properly, I think it's cool. I like the idea a lot. I feel like with facades in general, Spencer always talks about acoustic performance and great operable windows
Mm.
and tight compression seals. And unless you really experience that, those words don't really mean anything
Yeah.
to the average person. But, in terms of shading and solar gain, I mean, I get a lot of sunlight in my apartment. And so, I lower the shades and you think, oh, it's going to keep the inside cool. But that pocket between the shade and the glass unit, you stick your hand in there, it's an oven. And
Yeah.
so as long as that solar gain is coming into the unit, you're going to have to use some type of artificial conditioning to cool the space. So what do you think people get wrong with not understanding the concept of, if it's not blocked out from the exterior, or at least within the glass unit, it's basically deemed useless?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. It might be that it's also driven by tradition. That this I could imagine. Because here in Germany, when I think about residential buildings, normally in Germany we had these shutters, that you close from the sides, and these were of course outer sun protection devices, but it's really hard to say how it is here in Germany. How's the market share of inner sun protection devices or outer sun protection devices? When I really think about that, in residential houses, outer sun protection devices are very often used rather than inner sun protection devices. At the inside, often we use glare protection additionally, but most of the time, we really have shutters at the outside because this also gives you a better feeling for security. So this is what I would say. So
And
is
what
that in the
about, like, have you ever seen shades within the insulated glass?
I know this product. Let me think about, did I see that in a project so far? I don't think so. It's I also find it's a very cool product. Finally, it's cool, but also not used so often.
I know Schuco has this product where it's like a sort of a roll down exterior shading element that's sort of hidden within the slab edge
Yes, that's a
and
nice
then
one.
comes down. Have you ever seen it implemented, and does it work well?
What should I say now? Also, this I've never seen implemented, because finally it's like that. You need a lot of space in front of your floor slab, to really install that, because it's a huge package. Normally you would use that on a floor height glazing, and when you think about, you roll that up, it's a very slim shading device, but when you roll that up, it's still a huge package, and you need a lot of space in front of your floor slab, and my feeling is that this is also something that is, you need to bring that in very early in the planning stage. Later on you don't get it in anymore. And again, it's also a price thing. It's not the cheapest sun protection device you can buy. Let's say it like that.
Yeah, here we call it science fiction, but it's
Okay.
it sounds like a cool concept.
It is.
What about automated operable windows? Any of that?
Yeah, this is quite often used here in Germany. Meanwhile, that
so why is that one? Because that's not cheap. We've looked at that a lot. Why is that one sort of accepted and used a lot? Is it part of the sort of imprinting that the whole building has to work sort of in synchronously?
Yes.
Is that the idea?
This is what I would say. It's kind of, meanwhile we have some of these full automated buildings, and finally then of course you also have openable windows that you can maybe also open with your iPhone or whatever, and let's say when we talked about these other innovations where I think they are not really somehow the people are blocked from that. Everything that has to do somehow with digitalization or this somehow seems to be very trendy, and people are really going for that. That's what I see.
Well, if you think about it, if like you're laying in your bedroom or on your couch in your living room and you could work it all from your device, like open window, close window, roll down shade from the inside, roll down shade from the outside, tint glass, tint off. I mean, you would imagine there's a future where that's where we're trending. And I would think we're going to see it in Germany before we see it here. That's why I ask all these questions, because I'm basically foreshadowing what's going to come in a matter of time.
Yeah, yeah. So the good thing with that is also you can combine that with a lot of sensors. For example, these automated windows, we combined it here with CO2 sensors. When the CO2 level gets down inside the room, and it gets when the CO2 level is getting up. So you don't have enough oxygen anymore in the room, and then the window opens to let fresh air in, so that the people are more productive. That's what's quite often used meanwhile here in Germany.
Have you noticed
Yeah.
that COVID, in any sense, and then I'm going to shut up, Spencer. Have you noticed that COVID has changed any of these like design decisions in terms of adequate ventilation and
Yeah.
fresh air?
Yeah, it changed a lot of that, because during that time, of course, we all had to deal with that situation, and especially in schools and so on. The schools were closed because they were afraid of having this virus flying around everywhere. And then a lot of schools thought about new ventilation methods and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And what we also see is even in China, this started much earlier, because there you have this, but there's the other way around, where you want to get fresh air inside the room, but you know that in the big cities, you have a lot of air pollution, and for the Chinese market, for example, we developed these ventilation systems that also filter then the air coming from the outside to the inside, so that you really get healthy fresh air in.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of wanted to go back to, was that when we talk about these systems being used in Germany, the thing that you have to keep in mind is that a lot of the buildings rely on natural ventilation for
Mm.
like fresh air supply. So, in the US, like you mentioned laying on your couch and opening your windows and closing your shades with your iPhone. Well, in the United States, you turn on your air conditioner with your iPhone, right? Like
Okay.
and that's like what we do, but in Germany, it's like, oh no, we don't turn on the AC because we don't have AC. We open the window, It's
Yeah.
like it's a different it's just a different climate, in general. I mean, it's changing, but that's kind of the underlying reality there, that if you want to cool down the room, open the window, or if you want to get fresh air, open the window. You don't turn on, the ducted terminal fan to supply fresh air into the room that you're sitting in with all the, fixed glazing and closing you.
Yeah, I realized recently in Australia too that they don't have air conditioning. It's not really business as usual there. So a lot more sustainably conscious. So you're right that I think it's just kind of everything that's been bred into us, and a lot of unlearning that has to happen. Um,
Yeah.
but no, I enjoyed this conversation, Daniel.
Mhm.
Thank you for coming on. It was I think we learned a lot about the European market, and it would be a lot of fun to have you on again someday.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm very happy about this invitation. And yeah, if you have questions about the German or the European market, you can count on me. Thanks.
Thank you.
All
All
right.
right, Daniel. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.